So thanks everyone for joining us for today's entrepreneurship session. So this global trends in entrepreneurship. So Joseph Wei, contacted me. He's running a really interesting steering committee here at IEEE called the IEEE Entrepreneurship Steering Committee. And so he's going to tell us a little bit more about what's happening in IEEE with entrepreneurship and these global trends and really some opportunities that are available to you. So we're really glad that you joined us. Please go ahead, use the chat or the Q&A to ask questions. Joseph, I'm going to put myself off screen for now, but I'll be here in the background. Okay. I'm not going to go away, but take it away. And thanks so much for joining us for the HKN experience.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to meet with so many, EduCap new students and professionals. And congratulations on your induction. And I was inducted in 2018, I think, in San Jose. So my name is Joseph Wei. I'm the managing director of a company called Technology Ventures Group based in Silicon Valley. And this email actually is my company email, but I put in my chat is joseph.wei@IEEE.org. So that email has worked for the last 30 years. I've been a member of IEEE and a senior member. So I've been a member actually for 30 years for IEEE. So that email always works. So I'm just going to give a real quick overview of the trend for entrepreneurship, where a lot of you are very curious or very interested in maybe being an entrepreneur yourself. So a little bit of my background is that in really getting involved with the startup entrepreneurship in about 10, 12 years ago. So my most of my background actually is related to computer. I was the director for the NCPC group, and I also headed up another computer company, which headquarters is now the headquarters for Google. It's called Silicon Graphics Inc., SGI. And I also work for a outsourced manufacturing company in Taiwan, based in Taiwan. It's called Inventec. They built the first iPod for Apple, and now they're building the Apple speakers and also the AirPod. So some of these manufacturing companies, actually, they have design capabilities, so they call themselves ODMs. So the most famous one that everybody knows is called Foxconn because of Apple. And I also co-founded a startup incubator called Lab 360, which became part of the Heuristic Capital, which is a venture fund. And now I have my own company, basically mentoring, advising startups. And IEEE experience, I've been an active volunteer ever since I moved out to the Silicon Valley in 1996. So I've been involved with Region 6 now, specifically for the senior membership advancement. And I'm the vice chair for partnership. I do not run the IEEE Entrepreneurship Steering Committee. I'm actually part of the committee. And I also founded a group within the young professional group in Santa Clara Valley called the Startup Special Interest Group. So some key factors for entrepreneurship is recently it's impacted by pandemic. So a lot of people become entrepreneurs is by the definition of the jobs went away, or the company has shifted some of the job, so they have to figure out new ways to continue their livelihood. And remote working. So with the advent of internet and connectivity and laptops, now a lot of people are able to actually do the work without physically in the office building. And one of the biggest trend is in as far as startups in the segment is related to healthcare, because people are living much longer these days, and then as people age, usually the health issues start to come up. So there's a lot of investment in the healthcare industry, and I'll show you a little bit of market data in that. And the other factor is, like I mentioned earlier, is the availability of internet, especially broadband internet and mobile devices. And if you develop business model purely based on internet, it's a very low initial capital cost for people to become an entrepreneur, because literally you have a laptop, you can get on the internet, you can create a virtual shop to sell stuff or sell service that you have. And during dot-com days back in the 2000s, it's still a lot of startup company like Webvan and Pets.com that were not as successful, and Amazon and PayPal and eBay, they become very successful company. There's a large ecosystem based on cloud and connected devices. Now people can actually add services on top of them that you don't have to build the infrastructure yourself. And then also about, I think 15 years ago, specifically starting in Silicon Valley, we have a series of training program or investment program that is not just purely investment, but they also help you to learn and become successful entrepreneur from university or private, they call accelerators. So the famous one around here in Silicon Valley is called Y Combinator, and another one is called 500 Startup, which actually has already invested in over 2,000 startups. And the investment climate for startup has slowed down a little bit because of recent, especially this year. But overall, the trend you can see from this chart is still a lot of venture capital money go into startups. In terms of the global landscape, there's about $260 billion invested globally, and a good 50% of that is in North America. And 33 billion is in Europe, and the rest in Asia. And then if you look at it's kind of proportional to the global GDP economy. Why United States, or specifically when you say North America, most of the VC money actually is in the United States, and a lot of it is coming from California VCs. So there are some resources that for young entrepreneurs that you can tap these days. Universities, Babson, Stanford, MIT, Harvard, some of these top universities all have courses and programs to specific. Babson has a degree in entrepreneurship, and you can find the list of other ones from this URL. And because of the online courses, there are also topics related to entrepreneurship that you can get from Coursera, YouTube, Udemy, and other platforms. And then training programs specifically targeted for entrepreneurs who want to learn the basic knowledge about how you start a company. In the San Francisco, there's Founder Institute, Draper University, which has a requirement that the people joining the program has to be under the age of 29, and Founder Space. And in Europe, there's European Innovation Academy that they run these 8 weeks program in various major cities around Europe. And then specifically, if you are interested in hardware, HKN stands for Hardware Accelerator, has a program based in Shenzhen, China. So the capital investment in the United States in Q1 of last year by industry, as I mentioned earlier before, the top is internet-based. So it has received about $25 billion of investment in just Q1 last year. We don't have the data. I don't have access to the data for this year yet. And the second largest is in healthcare. And then mobile and telecommunication is driven a lot because of the recent launches of 4G, which was launched, I think, maybe 8 years ago, and now follow up with 5G. And various IEEE groups, specifically IEEE Standards Association, now we are working with various companies in defining the 6G standard for the next wave of mobile communication. The list of you recognize the logos of a lot of these companies. So what I wanted to show in this slide is none of these companies is more than 50 years old. So especially you look at Facebook, Tesla, Uber, Lyft, a lot of these companies were created in the last 20 years. So there's great opportunity if you have a great idea. So if you want to pursue the journey of entrepreneurship, please work with your professor or work with mentors in the industry to help you get started. So this is my contact information, and then I'll follow up with the next presentation, which is the IEEE Entrepreneurship Program. And after this, I go a little bit quickly because I want to reserve time for Q&A, and I believe these slides will always be available after the event. Okay, So IEEE Entrepreneurship, I think, is funded by the Future Direction and also IEEE technical activities. Right now, the community is open to IEEE members and also non-IEEE members. So approximately 5K are IEEE members and about 15K are non-IEEE members. And the 2022 steering committee chair actually is Joanne Wang, and Ken Stauffer is the past chair. And here are the list of other steering committee members. And the community, we did a recent survey of all these 20,000 community members. So what we found out is about 36% are aspiring entrepreneurs. So people who are very interested to become an entrepreneur, but have not started their startup company yet. And then early stage startup is about 28%. And then the scale up startup is about 12%, and 7% are actually investors. Right now, the 2022, the key area of focus is Women Entrepreneur Support Network and also Women Investor Network. So those two networks are kind of hand in hand working together to promote more women entrepreneurs to be funded with their startup. And then also tech transfer, where there's, and also specific related to deep tech, where a lot of the technology could have been in development in university for multiple years, and they can be actually taken out and not taken out, but repositioned to be the foundation to build new startup companies by the founders. IEEE has been running a mentoring office, founders office program where mentors and investors will offer basically advice and mentoring to any young entrepreneurs. And the survey that was done in 2021, the quality of mentoring actually was rated 4.5 off a scale of 5. And in terms of another question is, did the mentor meet your expectations? Is 4.75 out of a score of 5. So this is a free program, 60 minutes, and I encourage any people interested to tap into this free resource from IEEE.
Hey, Joseph, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we still see the end of your previous slides.
Oh, sorry.
We just want to take
I should have asked the...
No problem.
Let me restart. I'm sorry. I changed the slide. I thought that was also shared, but I guess it's tied to the old screen.
Yeah, if you don't do share entire screen, it only picks the one thing at a time.
Okay. Why is holding up right now? Okay. Thank you for letting me know. So I'll restart the presentation. So with the slide and are you able to see my slide now?
Not yet.
Not yet. It says the front page should have a slide say IEEE Entrepreneurship. Let me see what happened because here you go.
There we go. All set.
Do you see my screen now?
Looks great.
Oh,
yep.
Okay. So I start over again. I apologize for not checking. I just so different system is a little bit different. So So IEEE Entrepreneurship is is funded by, I think, Future Direction and Technical Activities. And right now it's open to both IEEE members and non-IEEE members. For IEEE members, we have about 5,000 members, and we have 15,000 members of non-members in this, what we call a community. So you're still seeing the slide okay, right? Sylvia? Okay. Can somebody confirm now you've seen the steering committee slide?
Yep,
to make sure that.
We can
Great.
see
So this is the steering committee for 2022. Joanne Wang is the chair of the committee. Ken Stauffer is the past chair of the committee. And then there's about 12 of us all together have different roles and function in supporting of the entrepreneurship steering committee programs. And I'm specifically is for building ecosystem partnership. And I'll talk a little bit about the specific partners later. And we recently completed a survey of the 20,000 members in our community. So 36% of them identify themselves as aspiring entrepreneurs. That means they have not started a company. They have not, maybe not even put down a draft business plan. They just want to be investigating how to be an entrepreneur. And then 28% are considered as early stage startups. So they are in the idea stage, maybe prototype stage, getting ready to start engaging with potential investors. And then 17% others. So that I don't have to detail what the other means, maybe later stage. But in terms of scaled up startup entrepreneurs, that's about 12%. And also 7% of the people who complete the surveys are actually investors. In 2022, the entrepreneurship focusing on 4 different areas. And the first and the last one actually go hand in hand. The Women Entrepreneur Support Network and the Women Investor Network. As a lot of survey and industry report had indicated, in particular tech startup, there's a very low representation of women-led startup companies. So entrepreneurship is building an ecosystem to encourage more women getting into to doing their own startup by having this support system behind them. The next 2, tech transfer and deep tech startup, are also kind of related. And some are startups, the idea and the technology might just come out when they form the company, but oftentimes they are also what we consider as deep tech technology that originated from university research, where the students or the professor decide to spin off and take the idea to create startup companies. IEEE also, the entrepreneurship also has what we call a founder's office. It's a free 60-minute session that anyone can arrange to have this discussion with IEEE mentors, investors, and experienced entrepreneurs to help with their, if they already have a startup, they can help asking all the different questions regarding scaling up the company, how to raise funding for the company, or just to help get ideas, when is the right time for somebody to commit full-time into entrepreneurship. So some of the past program is that there's a workshop ran in Uganda in 2019. There's a series of videos being offered on the website, and you should check it frequently because there are always new video coming up. And the one that is highlighted here called Demystifying Manufacturing Resources, I think it just finished and it's just posted on the IEEE Entrepreneurship website. So a lot of these videos are like an interview format of industry expert to explain certain type of things, like how does the SBIR, the Small Business Innovation Research Grant, work? Who can apply for it? How do you define a business model for IoT devices? Things like that. And it's also an Entrepreneurship Impact Award, and Samantha Snipes was the winner for 2021. So this is the program name for partnership is called Power by IEEE. and I'll go into a little bit more specific of each of these partners in the next slide. So within IEEE, the Explorer and the Dataport, they offer deep discount, 50% discount for access into the digital library. And then for AWS, they have a program service for startup that they basically, the startup can receive $10,000 of credit for using the AWS, which is the Amazon cloud service. Freshworks is a platform for CRM, which is customer relationship management. They also offer $10,000 of credit. NewChip is a virtual global accelerator. So they actually offer a program to train people to become entrepreneurs, and they offer a 20% discount. And most recently, we signed up with Oracle. Oracle also has a program called Oracle for Startups, and they offer 70% discount for 2 years to access Oracle. And also they provide the startup to be able to port whoever, the cloud platform they already onto the Oracle cloud platform. And in addition, because Oracle has a lot of customers and partners, they will also help the startup that join the program to match up with the appropriate customer and partners. Slidebeam is a up-and-coming popular platform for creating presentation slides specifically for pitch deck for investors. And NeonVest is also a startup themselves. They offer a consultation matchmaking platform to connect consultants and startup that has only a specific area that they need some consulting help. And they offer a 20% discount for the startup to use their platform services. So those are the current partners. And then IEEE Entrepreneurship also partnered with IIM, the IEEE Learning Network, to provide e-learning courses. And IEEE Entrepreneurship has an electronic newsletter that people can subscribe to. And IEEE has this star programs that they've been working with some of the industry groups, such as the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. The TC is the TechCrunch, which is a industry event for startup, usually is in San Francisco every September. And previously supported entrepreneur recipient at the various event. So here's a picture of some of the recipient I forgot, I think this is at the Consumer Electronics Shows. And here are the information that you can get connected with IEEE Entrepreneurship. And I think this is my last slide, and I'm open to have anybody ask any questions. So people are welcome to type it in the chat, type your question in the chat room. So there's a question, what does it take to be an entrepreneur? There's no easy answer to that. Entrepreneur sometimes is driven by necessity. I can give you a couple of examples. For example, there's a smartwatch company called Pebble Watch, and some of you might have heard about. They, I think, raised over $10 million on Kickstarter about 8 years ago. And the founder basically at the time was getting very frustrated with spam calls on his phone, and he likes to ride his bikes on the weekend. So whenever the phone rings or vibrate, he had to pull over and check his phone and said, hey, this is not a spam call. So he basically came up with the idea, why couldn't I just glance on my wrist and say, do I want to pull over to take this call? So it's come out of necessity. Medical device typically comes out of deep tech and much more driven by the industry now for the different type of devices or machines for enhancing the healthcare of people. So there's a question about, could you advise what steps entrepreneurs can take to overcome challenges? So there's a, so first of all, you have to clearly define the problem you're trying to solve. So as a technical driven organization like IEEE, I'm probably like 50%, I've stayed very technical because IEEE and IEEE Standards Association drives a lot of industry standards that make huge impact in like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth into the tech industry. So the first step is do not create technology and look for a problem to solve. The first thing is look for a problem that is big, and then specifically identify what possible way to solve that problem, because there are 10,000 different ways actually can resolve a problem. That's why if you look at a lot of internet-based business, you have a lot of competition. People use Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and so you just have to figure out your niche and be able to build a business model that you can sustain the business. Okay, I have two questions in the Q&A tab. What skills do you recommend students work to develop if they are interested in entrepreneurship and startups? Typical is like especially for tech startup. That's all I think most of my experience I can advise on is a combination of tech and business. That's why you see a lot of CEOs, particularly of founders of tech startup. They have a engineering degree plus an MBA from one of the universities, because just by creating better product a lot of times doesn't mean that you can be successful. I've seen some very strong business and financial driven entrepreneurs, but they just don't understand the technology. And oftentimes that's why typically is a startup company has co-founders, more than one, right? Because you just need to have a good grasp of both the business, financial, sales, marketing, and also understanding the technology. And then I mentioned in my slides earlier before, there's certain universities actually have programs or courses that you can take to learn about entrepreneurship. And then there are like Draper University or Founders Institute that you can pay to be, to get training from their programs. So the next question is, in your opinion, is necessity the mother of invention? I don't, well, again, there's no, one way to answer a lot of these questions, because they're manufactured, that's driven, the invention. Necessity, but if you have your personal understanding of the problem, then you can figure out the solution. And you can, if there's no, the first thing is also is to look and research if a similar solution is already available to solve the problem. And doesn't mean that there is a solution out there, then you should give up that idea. You should also figure out what better ways besides the current solution that can solve the problem better, right? And but better you understand the problem, the more I think likely you will figure out the proper solution that allows you to more easily convince investors to put money in your company and be able to build out a strategy and also a team. Because doing a startup is very rarely, a few people can build into a very, very successful startup very quickly. It's a really big team sport. So you need to also convince some of the early engineers to come in to bet their career and the next few years of their career, working 60, 80 hours to make your company's product the best and be successful. So while I'm waiting for other questions to come in, I was on the IEEE Vision Innovation Challenge Summit, which ties in with the annual IEEE Medals of Honor award ceremony. So you can Google and find the website. And once a year, this award ceremony is for IEEE to award recipients in the industry that have significant contribution with their invention. So last year, it was virtual, and the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, was named the entrepreneur, was named the awards of the recipient for being the successful entrepreneur. But you can check the website for other examples of IEEE members who have been very successful in their own startups. So there's a question in Q&A: how does involvement in other aspects of IEEE, like HKN, technical societies, complement involvement within IEEE entrepreneurship? Well, I mean, so depending on what area technology that you want to focus, one of the things about, I think, why IEEE is being so recognized for is kind of like a prestigious, one of the most prestigious technical organizations, besides it's the biggest technical organization for professionals, is that they have a lot of industry specific, like communication society, computer society, nanotech group, and power electronics, power energy. So you can actually find an area of your focus that ties in with your interests and also your skills. I think HKN is a great opportunity because actually HKN is not all for students. So we are, like, for me, I'm a professional and I became an HKN members. So also it's a more smaller network of people that you can connect with. And I think that's a lot of the things. I know earlier this session talking about networking, because the reason why we always allow time for networking in conferences is having me talk all the time is a one-way communication. It's much more effective to build connection with people if we have a dialogue. And that's where I think HKN and various technical societies that you can get involved with, you can actually build that kind of connection. Okay. Okay, I think that I addressed that question also in the chat. And then there's another question similar: does involvement in other parts of IEEE you're involved with, and how does it help your journey as an entrepreneur? My involvement with IEEE, especially coming to Silicon Valley. So I was a member. I graduated from Tufts University as an electrical engineer, and I worked for Digital Equipment Corporation. At that point, it's the second largest computer company that invented distributed computing. But we didn't have LinkedIn. We didn't have Facebook. So a lot of the networking is through, we keep in touch as business cards. So when I moved out to the Silicon Valley in 1996, I had to rebuild my network because most of the people I knew are all in the Northeast. So people suggested I join IEEE meetings, and also because I was in charge of the PC group. So one of the things in the PC is that there's a lot of standards being established through IEEE. So I mentioned a couple wireless standards, Wi-Fi now, which is IEEE 802.11. And you go back to Ethernet, it's IEEE 802.2. And then most recently, Bluetooth at IEEE 802.15. So I actually have dedicated staff to stay on top of some of these industry standard development, that because big companies cannot get together and form a standard. So IEEE becomes kind of the neutral partner for all these companies could gather. And knowing some of these standards being developed, some insights. I'll give you an example. Another IEEE fellow, Joe Tekor, he's the only surviving chip design engineer for Atari, based in Seattle. So I invite him to come down in 2014 to give a talk at the Consumer Technology Chapter meeting. And he spoke about Bluetooth Mesh because he was with a company called CSR at the time, which has the only technology to allow you to create a mesh network using Bluetooth. But he also sits on the Bluetooth SIG where he said some of the standards will be adopted in the Bluetooth SIG as an industry standard. So the mesh capability will be ubiquitous across all the whole Bluetooth devices or the ecosystem. And a year later, in 2015, when I went to Consumer Electronics Show, a lot of vendors start showing those type of products. But if you had come to listen to Joe's talk in 2014, you have gained some insight or a 1 year advantage, because you got the insight from Joe that this is the direction that the whole industry is turning to. The next question is, what's the most effective way to find business partner? What roles are needed for a successful startup? Not exactly clear on the context of the question. So when you build business, typically you would know who your key partners are. Sometimes they might be also customers. The partners can be customers. So I mean, so you should know. I don't know what about finding, and then what roles are needed for a successful startup. Usually, you have the CEO and then the CTO. Usually, if you have two co-founders, and sometimes you have a chief, marketing officer or business officer or revenue officer. That's the three. So depending on the background of the skill set of the founders, you want to find people with complementary skills, because starting a business is not about the best technology always wins. Sometimes it's how you get your technology to the market. So you need to find people who have complementary skill that you can work with as a co-finding. So there's a talk, I think, that was given at the Silicon Valley Young Professional Startup SIG about how do you find a co-founder, because finding a co-founder is very different from finding a employee, because co-founder is almost like finding a spouse, because the co-founders has to stay with you with your startup for the entire ramp up of the startup, versus employees oftentimes they comes and go. See, let me check in the Q&A. Okay, a question came in. Can you discuss IP and ethics in engineering? Yeah. So IP stands for intellectual properties, and usually it means something that you can patent, because in the United States we have a very established USPTO. So and they are very strict into enforcing IP protection. So basically, that's a whole different talk about IPs, because you have intellectual property is a general term. So you have patents, you have trademarks, you have copyrights. All these things are to protect the product or the service as a brand of the company. So, for example, I was talking to someone because about the origin of iOS. I believe a lot of people, especially younger people, might not have heard about that. So iOS, everybody relate to Apple iPhone and iOS app. So they think it's iPhone operating system. But really, if you look at, I think maybe Wiki or some historical trustworthy document that you can refer to. So iOS actually is the internet operating system invented by Cisco, when they start to have the routers become the key infrastructure hardware for building the internet. And then when Apple getting ready to announce the phone, they have to mention something about their operating system, just like Google did with Android. So they license the name iOS from Cisco. Ethics in engineering, especially, I think that's a hot topic about ethics in AI, right? How much do we rely on artificial intelligence to make the best judgment? Because a lot of times nowadays, also like as we talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning in the same sentence. Because in the past, artificial intelligence, there's a lot of human programming to make it intelligent. But nowadays, because of the capability of the cloud and the advancement in technology, human actually programming the computer to self-teach itself to improve the algorithms. So at a certain point, how do you make sure that the computer or that human program really meeting strict ethical standards that they start to determine on their own, right? So that's a whole different discussion. Do you have any personal example you can share the impact of networking you've done and connection you've made? So people ask me a question like, Joseph, how do you feel about working remotely from home for the last 2 years because of the pandemic? So I thought about before I answered the question, because some of you I already explained, I used to work for the the biggest computer company called Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC, back in the 80s to 90s. So I really took home a terminal. At the time, we didn't have PC back. Well, PC just came out, so very expensive to get a PC. And a modem, a 56 kilobit modem at home. So I can dial back into the DEC computers at work to check emails, simple stuff, no graphical interface. I've already been used to the virtual networking. But what I found is the human touch still cannot be easily replaced. I think that's why many people today, especially in the United States, are eager to get back into in-person events, because a handshake, a little tidbit about you when you meet someone, they know something. Like I wear an IEEE shirt that says Region 6, so I hope you guys all remember I'm from Region 6. I think that makes a difference. And you do you're an entrepreneur. Also, you can randomly meet people, but usually the advice is get a warm introduction. It's somebody who knows you, who are willing to vouch for you, to make introductions to somebody that's important, who want to spend time with you. So I would say, having been an active volunteer I was the chair for the Santa Clara Valley section for 3 times. So maybe people don't recognize by my face, but a lot of people recognize by my email, because it's always joseph.wei@IEEE.org. And I keep that email for all my IEEE related activities. And that allows me to meet up with a lot of very important and also relevant people in the tech industry. So the next question is, will Silicon Valley stay center for startups, or it's moving to other areas of the country or the world? This is Joseph Wei's personal opinion. Having been here for 20-something years and having worked in the Boston area, which used to be a tech hub for computer companies. So back in the 70s and 80s, in addition to Digital Equipment Corporation, there was a word processing company called Wang Lab. So they were the first company that actually built a dedicated word processor before PC with the Microsoft software that you can actually do word processing. And Data General, Computer Vision, Apollo Computer. There's about 12 or dozen more computer company in what they call the 128 belt around Boston. Unfortunately, a lot of those companies stay on the mini computers based on Unix and never move fast enough to go to adopt the PC using Intel and Microsoft Windows operating systems, so they all disappeared by now. And so the thing with Silicon Valley is that the venture capital ecosystem was established like 40 years ago when there was another big computer company that now was acquired by HP called Tandem Computer. They make non-stop computing. That means these computers are mainly used by banks or very critical applications that you cannot even have a split seconds of downtime from the computer. So Fairchild, which was one of the most early successful semiconductor company. So venture capital money has been growing in Silicon Valley. And the thing is, money grows money when now you look at the successful investment from Tesla, Facebook, a bunch of other companies, right? So right now, Silicon Valley actually I think has 3 times more venture capital money than any cities in the United States or around the world. So that is difficult for anybody to steal everything away from Silicon Valley. But however, I think with the ability for everything can be done remotely and also more cost effectively, you will see more startup coming from different countries. Specifically, you look at countries in China, right? They have 1.4 billion people. So one of the things is they have much more relaxed privacy rule. So the companies are able to get much more data to help them to understand the user behavior or other type of things. That's why I think Uber failed in China, and Didi, which came 1 year later than Uber, and be able to buy Uber and take over the majority of the market share of ride sharing in China. Thank you, Nancy. You remember Wang. So Dr. Wang actually is from my parents' hometown of Shanghai. So and unfortunately, I never really got to meet with Dr. Wang, the founder of Wang Lab. But yeah, he, because of my heritage being a Chinese American, so he's one of our heroes when I was rising up in my professional career. So this question, what first interested you about entrepreneurship? What made you decide to travel this route in your career? I think Vint, yesterday, somebody asked, he answered a question. He said a lot of young people asking about how they can plan their career. There's no planning. And his answer is, it's impossible to plan your career. You just kind of set certain goals and direction, and then you evolve yourself, things that are happening in the industry or things that you start to learn and that drive your interest may be different from your original thinking. So I started getting involved with startups, I think, back in 1960s when I joined NEC. So we invested in some partnership with some chip companies. So I learned about why we invest in certain chip companies was that the arrangement allows NEC to have a exclusive right to certain smaller chip companies' product exclusively for like a period of time, and that exclusivity allows NEC's PC to have advantage to be able to compete against the bigger guys like Compaq at the time or HP or Dell. And when I joined Inventec, so I got also invested in some local startup companies. So I got because I'm the actual local executive in Silicon Valley, so I got involved with a lot of observing some of these startup companies because the Inventec was an investor. So I got more and more interested. So I actually joined a startup company that is not highlighted in my LinkedIn profile because I think we're ahead of our time, but it's really fascinating time. So we use actually a different processor, not Intel processor. It's a processor called Transmitter, but it does emulation of x86 code. And we're able to build very compact at the time called Blaze servers that basically now all the big companies, IBM, HP, Dell, they all make Blaze servers to go after the internet, the .com markets, because at the time, but unfortunately, I think one, or Transmeta didn't get sufficient market penetration. And we're actually encouraged by Intel to switch to Intel processor and rebuild our product. But that ended up taking up a lot of our R&D dollars and time. And we were still, I think, 3 or 4 years ahead of the market. So ended up the asset of the company were acquired by Hitachi because we just kind of ran out of money. But that allows me to see, to be, seeing things from big company and also from small company. And then when I had the opportunity to help start this Lab 360 incubator and get more involved actually in the very early stage of some of the startups and working with founders all the time, it's an excitement. Because I'm usually much older than the founders. So by being able to interact with the younger founders, it keeps me young, it keeps me challenged. And the benefit for some of the younger entrepreneurs is my experience. It's like sometimes they just don't know what they don't know, and they don't know how to ask the right question. But with Lab 360, which we invest up to $100,000 in the seed round for any startup that we accept into our program. So it's also my motivation to make sure that I ask all the right questions to guide the startup founders to make less mistakes. You always make mistakes. It's just making less and not detrimental mistake. That's how sometimes successful startup becomes successful. As you probably heard, like PayPal, right? They almost ran out of money before they raised the $100 million funding, and that helped them to take off. Apple at one point was in such big trouble that Steve Jobs had to go to Bill Gates who gave him $200 million to save Apple. So a lot of times, I think these are the type of things that when you get involved, but you also, things will fall on your plate, and then you have to adjust to it. And so for me now at this stage of my career is putting 60, 80 hours into one startup. It's just too much for me. So I prefer to just stay at the advisory level to help various startups, to help guide them to be successful.
Well, Joseph, thanks so much. This has been a really great discussion, and you've got so much great information to share. And I think on the IEEE Entrepreneurship website, there's a lot of other stuff. So people should go there if they're interested in a lot of things that you've talked about, because I think there's all kinds of resources. I know we work with them. So one little tidbit is kind of pat on my back. So I talk about Joe Takor, who's a IEEE fellow, and also a past board member of the Consumer Technology Society. There's another board member and past member of the Consumer Technology Society. His name is Bob Frankston. Might not be as well known to people, but Bob and Bob Frankston and, oh gosh, I forgot his other co-founder's name. So they created a piece of software at the time for Apple computer called VisiCal. Do you remember, Nancy? I do. So, it's so funny. Well, I did my undergraduate in Boston in the 80s. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Dan Bricklin, Bob Frankston. They founded this company that built VisiCal, Visible Calculation Spreadsheet, right? So Lotus 123 was created for IBM PC. VisiCal was created for Apple. So I invited Bob to come out as a distinguished lecturer for the Consumer Technology Society meeting in Silicon Valley. And he came up that morning. We had breakfast and said, "Hey, Joseph, do you mind if I invite my friend Steve from Apple?" I said, at the time, I think Steve Jobs already passed away. So I know he meant Woz. So I said, "It's open. If he comes, great." So he showed up at the meeting. And as every meeting, the IEEE meeting, we're supposed to keep count of how many IEEE members and how many non-members. So I always ask this question: who are members, who are not members? And then Steve Wozniak didn't raise his hand as a member. So I say, anybody who wants to join, please sign up. I have the sign up sheet. And he said, hand it to me. So I can take the credit. Because there's a lot
Woz is HKN. Woz is HKN. So he's so good to us, and he's so good to students. Joe
Takor and Tom Coughlin accelerated him to become a senior member.
Mm-hmm.
And for senior member, you still have to wait 5 years
Mm-hmm.
to become a fellow. So he became a fellow, I think, in 2020, just before the pandemic.
Right. No, this is great. So yeah, these are all people that I know. So the networking in IEEE is great. And I encourage all of you that are listening to this and will listen to it later, please look at these resources, reach out to these groups, get involved, because there's really so much that's available to you. And boy, I mean, I kind of thought like this was like a Shark Tank invitation here, $100,000 and all your advice. So boy, if I had an idea, wouldn't I love to get accepted by your organization and have your counsel as well as all of your other support, you know, in the incubator stage. Well, this has been great. We're going to work more with your group, and we really appreciate you being involved with the HKN experience and with HKN. Thanks for your time today, putting the session together. We're going to close the whole HKN experience in just a few minutes over on the main stage. So if you're here, please join us over on the main stage for our closing ceremony. We're going to celebrate our HKN graduates. We're going to go ahead and check our tech time machine. So that's kind of fun. Wait do you see we've got in our tech time machine? And we're going to show you a professional induction. So what happens when professionals become members of HKN. So please come over and join us on the main stage, and join me in thanking Joseph Wei for joining us today and talking about entrepreneurship in IEEE. Take care.